Come to think of it, life was pretty good for me. At 50 years old, with two beautiful girls going to university, and my wife Jade and I ready to celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary, things were going well. We owned most of a very nice house in an upscale suburb and drove nearly new cars. My job as a regional sales manager for a national company was going well. Jade, who had just returned to work 5 years ago, was also in a good position. She took a job with Greg, a friend of ours, as his assistant, but soon found her place on their advertising team. 3 years later, Greg made us an offer. He wanted to grow the business, but needed capital. He offered us a stake in the business, and Jade would take a senior position on their sales and business development team. To say she took to it like a duck to water is an understatement. 2 years later, she was making more money than me. So, what was there for me to complain about? Probably the fact that Jade and I were so busy that we hardly ever saw each other. In many ways, we were living separate lives, like ships passing in the night. Don't get me wrong, our marriage was strong, loving, and caring. I just wished I could see her more often. That was going to change, and we had no control over it. The world was hit by a virus so powerful that the only solution was to lock down entire countries with draconian controls that some compared to martial law. It was a full-blown pandemic, and the actions reflected the danger to humanity. Country and state borders were closed. Schools, churches, universities, and public forums were closed. Virtually all non-mainstream businesses were closed and employees were ordered to stay home. Those who could work at home were forced to do so, and only those employees who were rated as essential were allowed to work. All stores, with the exception of supermarkets and pharmacies, were closed. To support these actions, the police took to the streets in large numbers to enforce the new laws. And so we were locked up, imprisoned in our own home, with no one but ourselves to talk to. To me, this was the chance we had been looking for so long. In fact, it was a blessing in disguise. Working from home was like a vacation. Jade, unlike me, worried that the business was so new that they didn't have the same cash reserves as the big players. We set up separate offices, so we wouldn't interfere with each other. We brightened up the day with some fun banter about who was making coffee or lunch, and it was sort of a renaissance period in our happy marriage. For the first couple weeks, it was just like the honeymoon period. We cooked together, shared cleaning and household chores. We slept in on weekends and rode bikes. I'd been a fanatical cyclist all my life, and now Jade saw it as her only chance to get out of the house. Back then, people were only allowed to go out if they played a sport and had to maintain a social distance of at least 2 meters. Cycling seemed like the perfect solution. It became our daily break from work and an escape from household chores. During this 2-week period, Jade really took to it and looked forward to it as much as I did. The break from our usual routine gave us the opportunity to try out activities that we would have otherwise missed due to travel and long working hours. As a treat, I took an online massage course and Jade became the lucky recipient of my nightly massages. This in turn led to the most amazing sex of our lives, as if a magic switch had flicked and we were transported back to our early years together. We made love every day, often twice a day. God, it was incredible. Jade was still very attractive, active, and sexy even at 48. She decided to fill the time by taking an online course in aromatherapy, after which the delivery vans came every day and the house smelled wonderful. The combination of aromatherapy and massage had amazing results. As good as life was, things went downhill in the 3rd week. It became difficult to maintain that level of excitement and interest. We became irritable, feverish, and needed a boost. To try and get the magic back, I cooked a great dinner. Jade seemed impressed with my cooking skills. But as soon as she finished, she thanked me for the meal and went straight back to work, leaving me to sit on my own. The 3-apet was starting to take its toll on their business. I'm no fool and understood that. But opportunities like this don't come around often. A chance to start our marriage, I felt was slipping away. She spent too much time on the damn computer or phone chasing clients and customers. I needed to get her away from that damn computer. I ran a hot bubble bath, filled the bathroom with scented candles, selected smooth and luscious jazz, and dimmed the lights. When I entered her office, she was typing diligently like a madwoman. She looked up with a strange expression when I held out my hand to her. She stared back at me. Mark, what are you doing? I lifted her out of the chair, and she got up reluctantly. Mark, honey, I have work to do. Putting my finger to her lips, I gagged her and took her to the bathroom. She moaned the whole way. Mark, please, honey, I have work. It's important. As soon as she saw the bathtub and the candles, she smiled broadly. You sexy monster. It looks incredible, but darling, I have work. My love, I'm sure your clients will still come tomorrow. So tonight relax, enjoy the champagne, and massage that gorgeous body. I helped her undress and held her hand as she climbed into the hot tub. As she reclined in the tub, I handed her a glass of champagne. She took a deep breath. Thank you, darling. I can't believe how thoughtful you are. I'm spoiled. Y chuckled. He worries my love. I will demand reparations later, and maybe I will get it out of your body. God, I hope that's a promise, she whispered. I left her lying there, covered in water, head tilted back, eyes closed, listening to music and enjoying the relaxing water. I walked into the break room, and as I passed her office, I heard her phone buzzing. Damn. It would probably distract her if she heard it. I ran inside and was about to turn it off. But when I saw it was a message from Greg, I decided to open it in case it was important. When I opened the message, I was stunned. There was a message. Fuck, I can't wait to taste that juicy pussy again. Jesus Christ, what the hell? Was this a joke? I started scrolling down, a flood of messages. Greg, you sexy bastard, that's not fair. I need to feel your beautiful big tool inside me again. I want your pussy in you. I loved the way you bent me over the table. When I scrolled down the page, there were literally hundreds of messages and even a few pictures and videos. A few pictures of his tool and a few pictures of Jade with no clothes on. Jesus, this was a long time ago affair. This wasn't a joke or a prank. This was for real. As I sat stunned, my heart racing, Jade called out, Honey, my glass is empty. I handed her another glass and looking at her beautiful, smiling face, I didn't know what to say. She sighed, smiling blissfully. Thank you, sexy. Heh, don't worry, love. I returned to her office lost. The pain was so deep. How could she do this after all we'd been through? Raising children, building a life, 25 years of standing side by side. Overwhelmed and filled with wild anger, I walked outside into the cold night air, trying to calm the rising tide. I wanted to hurt her. I wanted her to feel my pain, my humiliation, my burning shame. It was crazy and irrational, but I had a plan. I searched her phone, pulling out videos and pictures, and forwarded the messages to everyone in her contact list. Over 300 contacts would get an unexpected message. Friends, family, clients, all of them. I plugged my phone into my laptop and downloaded everything. 3 ain't a peck curious as to what she was so busy with. I opened her computer. She was also emailing him, so that's what was so important. I found a ton of other emails similar to this one. I repeated my previous actions and forwarded them to her contact list again. I pulled out my flash drive and downloaded everything again. I needed all the evidence I could gather. That's when I realized my marriage was over. I wanted to just leave, but that damn virus locked us together and there was no way out. We converted the room above the garage into a bedroom for our daughter before she left for uni to give her some privacy. I started packing up all my stuff and moving it in there. It would be my haven until it was all over. I was already on my 3rd attempt when Jade came out wrapped in a towel. When she saw me carrying an armful of stuff, she hissed questioningly. What the hell are you doing? I'm moving into Chanel's room until this damn virus thing is over. Mark, what's going on? You're scaring me. You're acting crazy. Back off, Jade. From now on our marriage is over. I'll file for divorce as soon as I can. I roughly shoved her as she screamed. Mark, talk to me. What's going on? It will become obvious. Just leave me alone. I recommend you get a lawyer, and as soon as possible. She called out to me as I walked away, leaving her looking at me with her mouth open. I locked myself in the house and waited for the shit to hit the fan. It didn't take long and there was a furious pounding on the door. Jade was crying and screaming hysterically. Mark, You fucking evil asshole. My God, why didn't you talk to me? God damn it, you've ruined everything. Christ almighty, say something, you fucking asshole. Fuck you, Jade. Why don't you see if Greg and his handsome big buddy can fix things for you? Silence, then crying, mad, agonizing sobs. Mark, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. When I didn't say anything, she growled. God, it was only sex. How she could feel and sound offended after her actions is mind-boggling. I hope it was good, because it ended our life together, everything we had worked for. Why, Jay, tell me why. Her sobs started again, and they drowned out her words as she whispered. Mark, it was just sex, it doesn't matter. Just sex, it was wrong, I know, but it was harmless. If you just talk to me, we can get past this. Harmless my ass. It went on for months looking at these messages. Mark, please open the door so we can have a normal conversation. Let me explain everything. Let's talk about this. No? Jade, there's no chance to talk anymore. Now we just need to clean up the mess. Yeah, you sure made it, she wheezed. Jesus, Mark, you probably ruined Greg's marriage too. I didn't do anything. You're the one who created that shit where you took care of his family while you fucked him. Don't cry to me about his marriage. Mark, if you had just talked to me, we could have tried to fix things, find a way to get past this. But now, Jesus knows everything. God knows what the girls will say, or mom and dad for that matter. Hell, I never thought you could be so mean, so angry. Mean, angry, my God. Jade, you have a 6-month affair with our friend and you're telling me I'm evil. For God's sake, woman, you're ridiculous. Mark, darling, no one needed to know. We could have fixed it ourselves. It's not the end of the world. Like hell it is, it's the end of the road for me. Mark, open the door. Honey, please let me fix this. Leave me alone, Jade. I just want to get a good night's sleep and clear my head. It took a half hour of knocking on the door for her to realize I wasn't answering. Finally, she came back into the house, leaving me and my anger simmering. I plugged in my laptop and sorted her messages into a file I could send to my lawyer. I was filing for divorce in the morning. I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to fight my conscience. Our marriage was over. While I was gathering all the evidence, my phone buzzed continuously as I put it on vibrate mode. I wasn't ready to face anyone face to face. I guessed it was our daughters or parents. I wanted a chance to calm down before talking to them. It was a long night. I tossed and turned, dipping in and out of sleep. I woke up around 9 and wandered into the house to shower and eat breakfast. When I walked in the back door, Jade was standing at the bench making coffee. She turned around and took a quick glance at me. Good morning, Mark. Would you like some? She looked terrible. Her eyes were bloodshot, red and sagging. No thanks, I'll make my own when you're done. I'm going to take a shower. Suit yourself, so be it. I locked myself in the bathroom, showering and trying to fortify myself for what was to come. When I walked into the kitchen, Jade handed me her phone. I didn't want to take it, but after all, whoever it was, I would have to meet him today one way or another. Hi Mark, it's Greg. I just want to say I'm sorry about what happened. It's not Jade's fault, it should be my fault. I interrupted him halfway through. Forget it, Greg, it's over. You and I will meet up once this virus thing is over and we'll finish it like men. I disconnected without giving him a chance to say anything else. Jade stood there looking at me. Mark, he was just trying to apologize, to ask for forgiveness. Bullshit, he can shove his apology where the sun don't shine. Next time I talk to him, he better be ready. I walked past her and noticed she had made me coffee. I poured it out and made a new one. She looked at me angrily. I made it for you. Yeah, it probably had rat poison in it. Jade, I don't want to see you or talk to you. I'm gonna call my lawyer as soon as I make coffee, so I suggest you do the same. She tried to take my hand and turn me back. Mark, please, honey, if we could just sit down and have a calm discussion, we could fix this. We've been through so much, it's just a bump in the road. If you let me explain, I'm sure we can work it out. Okay, then, Jade, tell me why. She leaned back against the sink. I don't know, honey. I guess it was the big 5 OS rushing towards me, and lately I've been feeling unattractive. For a woman, it's different. All my life, men have noticed me. I'm not blind, and I know I'm attractive. But as I got older, the look stopped. I started to feel invisible. Younger guys stopped noticing me, and I felt old, and Greg flirted with me, flattered me, made me feel desirable. Once I told him how I felt, and he kissed me, and I let down my defenses, but honestly, it was just sex. How shallow are you, Jade? It's all about you feeling your age. We all get older. You should have talked to me. You should have let me help. Let me make you better. Yeah, you feel better. Hell, Mark, you look better now than when we were younger. We go out somewhere and I see beautiful young girls staring at you. You've gotten better looking and I look old next to you. Hell, we were supposed to grow old together. That's what life is all about. I wanted to grow old with you, spend the rest of my life with you. Damn it, I love you. Sobbing, she mumbled through her snot. We still can, Mark. I love you. I always have, and that hasn't changed. Shaking my head, I groaned. Call your lawyer, Jade. You're going to need all the help you can get. Pouring my coffee, I walked into the room and plopped down on the small couch. God, what a horrible mess. All I wanted to do was escape, but I was locked up, imprisoned with this crazy bitch. As I sipped my coffee, I got another call. It was Melissa, Greg's wife. Hey, Mark. She'd obviously been crying. I'm sorry, I don't know what to say, but thanks for letting me know. It's okay, Melissa. I needed it for my own peace of mind. What are you going to do? She sighed. I don't know, God. Everything is so messed up. I want to kill him, divorce him, cut off his damn tool. But it's not that easy for us. Our kids are so young. Everything we have is business related. We're mortgaged up to our eyebrows. If I leave now, I'm going back home to my parents, and that's going to be hell. You have to do what you think is right. And what about you? What are you going to do? She asked. I'm going to call my lawyer as soon as I hang up the phone and file for divorce. Shit, shit, shit. I'm so sorry, Mark. Is there no way to work this out? No, as far as I'm concerned, it's over. We talked for a while longer before hanging up. Arthur, my attorney, was shocked when I told him the story. He had been involved in all the major decisions in our lives, especially the refinancing and investment in Greg's business. He asked me what I wanted to do, and I informed him that I wanted to file for divorce. I offered to send him proof, but he laughed. It doesn't matter. She may be wrong and adultery is grounds for divorce, but it won't help you. You can't get away from the marital act. She gets half of everything, even if she's wrong. Accepting his news, I muttered. Just send me the papers and I'll fill them out. But I'm definitely filing for adultery. I want everyone to know. Buddy, the only advice I can give is to take it easy, buddy. You're mad now. I'll send the papers. But please think about it a bit. The decisions you make now, you'll have to carry out for the rest of your life. Later the papers came and I was filling them out when the phone rang. Check the name. It was my oldest daughter, Katie. Daddy, what the hell is going on? I just talked to Mom and she's hysterical. I can't understand a word she said. Is it really all true? The emails and messages, is it true or is it some kind of stupid prank? She didn't believe it at all. It was her mother, her beautiful, caring, loving mother she was so close to. I could hear the disbelief in her voice. Taking a deep breath, I groaned. Yes, it was true. I had only found out myself yesterday at the same time as everyone else. Damn it, who sent this out? It came from my mom's email. Feeling a little guilty, I muttered. It doesn't matter who sent it. All that matters is that we found out. So, what are you going to do? Of course, I'm going to file for divorce. What do you think I'm going to do? A sharp intake of breath preceded her frantic screaming. Daddy, no, please, no, 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 no. Then there was silence, after which she added, divorce is just too damn much, isn't it? Sure. You can try to get over it or whatever. We're talking about Mom, Dad. It's just a mistake. It's meant to be. You've been together forever and she loves you, you know that. I used to know it, Buttercup. I would have bet my life on it, but now all I can do is try to stop myself from killing her. You don't mean that, Dad. It's just anger. Calm down and take a breath. Of course divorce isn't the answer. Maybe you could try a counselor or something. Sorry, Buttercup, but I've made up my mind. I want out. She's humiliated me enough. The conversation dragged on. She tried to make me change my mind, and we kept repeating the same words over and over again. Eventually, she hung up the phone, as confused and frustrated as I was. Julie, my other daughter, kept up with Katie, and again the afternoon was lost as she tried to get me to change my mind. Unfortunately, she didn't believe it was true and tried to convince me that it was just some weird hacker or something. Even her persuasive arguments couldn't change my mind. I filled out the paperwork and returned it to Arthur, signed and completed. When I called him, he gave me another piece of advice. Split the finances now before things turn into a scandal. It made sense, and I started going through our finances and possessions. We only had one bank account, and it was a joint account, and everything was deducted from it, credit cards, mortgages, everything. Opening another account over the phone was impossible. You had to go there in person. Everything was tied up. The only good news was that there was nothing she could do either, so the money was safe for now. Of course, the rest of the day went the same way. I took calls from friends and family. Everyone wanted to know what was going on. By the end of the day, I was tired of explaining. Jade's parents were the worst. They couldn't or wouldn't believe it, and seemed convinced that it was some evil plot I had devised to discredit their daughter. During dinner, I went into the house and was rummaging through the cupboards, looking for something to eat when Jade walked in. "Can we talk some more, Mark? Please, we need to talk about this. Katie and Julie are devastated. Hell, you scared them half to death with all that wild talk." "It's not wild talk. I've been honest with them. I told you, Jade. I've already talked to Arthur and filed the papers. We are now in the process of divorce." "Jesus Christ, Mark, that's ridiculous, honey. It was just sex. I had no love affair or plans to run away with him. It was stupid and selfish, but it doesn't have to be the end of the world." "My God, you're acting crazy." "No, crazy was me when I didn't see this happening right under my nose. Hell, I must be a fucking idiot. You both must have laughed your asses off. Jesus, all those family reunions of yours, you and him must have had a good laugh." "No, honey, it wasn't like that. We never laughed or even talked about it." "Bullshit, you fucked for 6 months. Don't tell me you never once laughed about slipping away or getting out of it." 6 fucking months, Jade. 6 months, her face dropped. "We never laughed at you or Melissa. Say what you want, but I feel like a fool. All this time I loved you, brought you flowers on your birthday, and he gave you quick sex. God. How many times did we make love after you were with him?" "Never," she screamed. "I would never do that to you. I love you. I'm sorry I didn't think about it. I didn't mean to hurt you. It just started out as innocent flirting and fun. Please, Mark, can we just sit down and talk?" "Hell no, it's over. You'll get the papers in a week or so. Just sign them and send them back." "Like hell I'll do that. There's no divorce. You're being stupid. We can fix this." I didn't say anything back, and she burst into tears. "Mark, you've already ruined me, my career, and Greg's business. How much more revenge do you want?" "It's not about revenge. It's about getting it over with and moving on." I took the chips and left her there looking after me. The next day, I was woken up by Jade banging on the door. I opened it to see what she wanted, but she persistently barged in. "Mark, Greg, Melissa, and I talked last night, and we have a plan to try and save the business. We're going to say that the disgruntled employee we fired hacked into my email account and set the whole thing up in retaliation for my firing. Say what you want, I don't care. Mark, we need your help. If we want to get people to believe this, we need your help. Can you back us up?" I laughed. "Hell no. If anyone asks, I'll tell the truth. People need to know what lying, manipulative, despicable shitheads they're dealing with." My rage shocked her. Melissa agreed. "She's going to support us. Mark, I'm begging you. Greg and Melissa are going to lose everything. His reputation is in tatters. It's his fault, not mine." She stomped her foot. "But that's exactly what we'll say. We'll let everyone know, including the kids and mom and dad. Suit yourself, but I'm not helping." For the next week, every time I went inside, she was on the phone with customers, spreading the word to those who had gotten the letter. I left them alone, but Melissa called me and begged me to help. They were desperate to resuscitate the business and save Greg's reputation. Melissa seemed to have forgiven him and openly begged me to reconsider my position. I was so sick of it all and wanted it all to end. But there was no way to avoid the daily drama, no way to avoid the hellhole our house had become. Katie called several times and became increasingly upset with me. Her mother even convinced her that it was a strange conspiracy to discredit her mother. She convinced me that I should take it as it came, forgive and forget. Of course, all I had to do was send her the video clip, but I couldn't bring myself to do that. Instead, I went the other way and tackled her mother. She was in her office working with new clients, busier than ever. I pulled a chair over next to her desk, sat down and folded my arms. Jade, you have to tell Kathy and July the truth. They're driving me crazy with this hacker nonsense, she recoiled. What? Why not let sleeping dogs lie? Because they won't leave me alone. They lecture me every day on the phone about why I'm torturing you with a divorce. They think I'm the bad guy. She leaned forward across the table, leaning on her elbows and stared straight at me. Mark, if you let me, I'll make it up to you. Give me a chance to make things right. Forgive me and let's start over. We managed to get all the customers back on board and it looks like we're almost back to normal. Jade, if you don't tell the girls the truth, I'll be forced to send them the last proof I have. Mark, please, why don't we just leave it alone? No one loses that way. I lose at this point. The girls treat me like the bad guy because I don't buy your bullshit. Either you tell them or I will. No, that's not fair. I don't want a divorce and me and the girls are just figuring things out. I'm not going to ruin it. Either way, you can't say anything that would make them believe it. I pulled a flash drive out of my pocket and waved it in front of her nose. On this flash drive is a video of you having fun with Greg. I think it might convince them. She almost fainted. My God, you can't, I nodded. Either you tell them or I'll just send it out to everyone you know, including our parents and kids. God, Mark, you're such an asshole. Why do we have to get divorced? Greg and I are over. Give us a chance and I promise I'll spend the rest of our lives together to make it right. You can't fix anything, Jade. Even if I could forgive you, I could never trust you again. I'd always be looking over my shoulder wondering who you were sleeping with. Jesus, girl, I mean Greg might not be the only one. There could be hundreds. She growled furiously. Get out now. I stood up and walking to the door growled. Either you tell them or I will. A few days passed, but my daughter called me to apologize for being so hard on me. She spoke to her mother and she asked her to be gentler with me and that we would work things out ourselves. Obviously, she didn't tell her the truth, but at least now Katie was a little more understanding. When I called and talked to the real estate agent about selling the house, Jade exploded. When I told her about it, she became hysterical. Jesus, Mark, we can't sell the house. What will everyone think? We spent hours on the phone explaining and convincing everyone that we were okay, and now you want to sell the house. Jesus, be reasonable. I was a little shocked, her indifferent attitude. Look, Jade, we're both going to need somewhere to live. I know you can't afford to buy my share of the house, so you can't stay here. I don't want to stay here. I've got nothing but bad memories now. I think the best thing would be to sell the house, and then we can go our separate ways. She grabbed my hand, squeezing it tightly between hers, and looked intently into my eyes. Or we can stay and try to make it through. Mark, I love you as much now as I did when we were married. I don't want a divorce. Can't we work things out? For a man who says he loves me, you have a strange way of showing it. Intrigue doesn't show love. Clutching my hand tighter with tears rolling down her cheeks, she wheezed. I made a mistake. It was stupid. It was selfish, but that doesn't mean I don't love you. We've made a lot of mistakes over the years, both of us, Mark. We can work through this. Jade, you just don't understand. You've lied to me. You've lied to me for months, and you'd keep lying to me. You say it's over between you and him, but if I hadn't found those messages, it would still be going on, wouldn't it? She gently stroked my hand. Mark, please just tell me, would it still be going on? When all this shit settles down, you'll be together again. She sighed, staring at the floor, and the silence grew longer and longer until I snapped into a growl. Well, That would be exactly what it would be, wouldn't it? She whispered hoarsely. I don't know. I guess so, but everything changed. We've gotten so much closer since the lockdown. You were so loving and caring. Everything changed, she pleaded. It's over now, and if you give me a chance, we can put it behind us and forget it ever happened. Jesus, Jade, you don't even have any remorse. You just expect me to accept it and say, well, never mind. Let me tell you something. Life isn't like that. I pulled my hand away. We're selling the house. It'll be on the market tomorrow. I walked away, leaving her in a completely depressed state. It was a bad time to sell. Real estate agents couldn't visit the house. They couldn't bring potential clients. It had to be done online and relied on the pictures I took. I spent a day taking photos that I thought highlighted the best features of the house, sent them to the agent, and the next day, the house was listed for sale. This set off a maelstrom of calls from friends and, of course, family who wanted to know what was going on. Jade answered all the calls trying to hide the truth. She told everyone some ridiculous stories about us looking for a better place. When the country got the virus under control and the restrictions were slowly lifted, we had a little more freedom. Things were supposed to slowly return to a more normal way of life, but that was a month away, no less. During that month, things calmed down between Jade and me. We ate dinner together. We were able to talk without arguing or yelling, and the anger gradually subsided. One day at dinner, she asked, "What can I do to change your mind?" "I'll do anything." Glancing across the table, I sighed. "I don't think anything will help. I've lost trust in you. But if we tried to mend the relationship, the first thing you'd do would be to quit your job." "What?" She choked. "I can't do that. I have shares in the company. We own 35% of the business now. God, Mark, I love this job. I love being a part of it. Honey, I promise it's over between me and Greg. It's over. You made that promise to me 25 years ago, on our wedding day. It obviously meant nothing then. Why should I trust you now?" She leaned back in her chair. "Mark, I made a mistake. I know that, but I promise. What else can I do? Quit your job. It seems simple to me. If you want to try again, that's what I demand. And even then, I make no promises." She shook her head. "I don't understand. What difference does it make? Mark, I love this job. I've put my all into it. Why can't we just try to move on? Because you'll be working together every day, traveling together. I can't have that. If you want to make up, that's the first building block." "No, Mark, that's not fair. I'll do whatever it takes, but I'm not quitting my job." "That's fine, Jade, but it shows exactly where I stand, doesn't it?" This little exchange led to a long discussion and argument by my daughters, who tried to play the role of mediator. But they were on my side. They both tried to convince her to take my side, but she was adamant. I don't know if she was just stubborn, if she thought she could have her cake and eat it, or if she was just stupid. Later, when we watched the late news, she nervously snuggled up to me as we watched TV. "Mark, will you sleep with me tonight? I need you back in our bed." Pulling her head closer and kissing her forehead, I said, "I don't think that's a good idea. It will only confuse things." She tried to turn our kiss into something deeper. "Mark, honey, this could be the first step to reconciliation." "I don't want to reconcile. I want to move on." She burst into tears and ran into the bedroom, and I could hear her crying. Turning off the TV, I went to bed. The papers came back from the lawyers and were unsigned. Jade refused to sign. She wanted to fight. It took several days of constant arguments and my threats to send a video of her having fun at Greg's place to get her to sign the papers. The realization of the inevitable finally came, and she accepted it. When the restrictions were lifted, the house sold in just a couple weeks. I found a small apartment in the city, as did Jade, and she found an apartment closer to her office. Our daughters went through a period of hating and blaming me. Julie was the worst. She believed her mother and blamed me for not supporting her. It took a while before we could talk. "Julie, have you ever seen me act without knowing the whole story? Look back over your life and name me one instance where I reacted too quickly or too harshly to you." She thought for a moment before answering. "Never. Dad, you've always been so fair with us. That's why this seems so wrong." "You know what's frustrating, Julie? is that you've never considered the fact that I know the truth, and my actions are not an overreaction, but a logical result. She sighed, looking at me. So you're saying Mom really cheated? I nodded slowly. I don't believe that, Dad. She would never do that. She loves you. Couldn't you go to counseling or something? What would you do if you found out your boyfriend cheated on you, Julie? Would you give him a second chance? I saw reality hit her. We broke up on better terms. The separation made the divorce easier. We split everything 50-50. Although things went well for Jade at first, the difficulty came with Melissa. She tried to accept that Jade and Greg were still working together, but she was having a hard time, and so was I. How could she trust them? We no longer kept in touch. She blamed me for some of their difficulties. Melissa thought that if I forgave Jade and stayed with her, the problems she was having with Greg would somehow be resolved. Greg was Jade's closest friend, but because of Melissa's constant nagging, a rift had formed between them and he was forced to withdraw, which hurt Jade. She spent most nights crying on the phone with our daughters, which in turn prompted them to call me, begging me to forgive and forget. Greg. The moment the restrictions were lifted, I took my chance. I had made him a promise, and it was time to act. I waited in the parking lot of their business. The day of reckoning had come. As soon as he stepped out into the parking lot and saw me, he stopped dead in his tracks. Mark, I'm sorry, I was a fool, and I apologize for this shitstorm. I took off my jacket and put it on the hood of my car. Greg, I promised you I'd come get you. Now I'm here. Let's do this like men. He quickly stepped back. Mate, I don't want to fight you. It won't solve anything. You're not my buddy. You gave up that privilege when you screwed my wife and lied to my face. He realized when I approached him that this was happening. He dropped his briefcase and started to take off his jacket. As soon as he threw off his jacket, I was on top of him. We were about the same height and couldn't be called fighters, but I had anger on my side, a cold, dirty feeling in my stomach that needed an outlet. When I hit him, the pain subsided a little and my stomach relaxed. Not all the blows were one-sided. He threw a few punches too, but driven by anger, I kept going. The only thing that stopped me was the policeman pulling me away from him. When I looked back, there was a small group gathered there, and among them was Jade, who was covering her mouth with her hands. She looked terrified. The policeman separated us and Greg, and I stood looking angrily at each other. There was blood running down his face. His nose was broken and his lip was smashed. He wasn't an oil painting, but then again, neither was I. Jade approached, but as she got closer, the policeman raised his hand. Step back, please, lady, let me handle this. She stood without moving from her seat, her eyes fixed on me, pleading, questioning. The policeman interrupted the moment, pushing us back to the car, and began his interrogation. To his credit, Mark didn't try to accuse me or press any charges. He simply told the policeman that we had had an argument and nothing else had happened. The policeman was not convinced by this, but what could he say? He decided to make us shake hands. When we shook hands, Greg held on longer than necessary. Sorry, buddy, I didn't plan any of this. It was just an error in judgment. He dropped my hand when I refused to accept his apology, and I turned and walked to my car. Jade ran after me. Mark, I'm sorry, I kick myself every day for screwing up, but can't we at least try? Jesus, 25 years. Mark, 25 years has gotta be worth something. I'm sorry, Jade, but I can't. I kick myself every day too. Why didn't I see it coming? You had an affair right under my nose and I didn't even know. There's no way we can live together because I'll always wonder where you are, who you're with. I left feeling lighter, stronger, and so much better. Violence may not solve anything, but sometimes it can't be avoided. When the restrictions were lifted and the world went back to normal, the media was full of good news about how we survived the virus. Well, some survived, but others died. Millions are unemployed, businesses are down, and will never open again. Food banks are overflowing, poverty is at the highest level since the Great Depression. Yes, when I got home, I heard unfamiliar voices coming from the basement. I listened carefully and heard my husband talking to a woman. Hey, can we be together until late tonight? Yeah. My wife is out until tonight, so relax. Let's enjoy our time together slowly. My husband was talking in a mushy voice. He was cheating on me, without my knowing. Blood rushed to my head, and I wanted to rush in right away, but I calmed down. Even if I went now, I would only catch them in the act. I planned to make them taste hell. My name is Kate Miller. I'm currently 40 and working as an office clerk for a stationery manufacturer. I married my husband, Keith, 5 years ago, but we promised to live together as a childless couple due to our age. Since then, we've been living together happily, but lately, we've stopped seeing each other as members of the opposite sex. Before, I used to be embarrassed to show my face without makeup in front of Keith, but as the years went by, I became able to walk around without any shame. Keith, like me, got used to it, and although he used to exercise if he gained even a little weight because he didn't want to be thought of as sloppy, he eventually stopped caring about his appearance. Now, he has a beer belly and fat resting above his belt. You've gained weight recently. Shouldn't you exercise for your health? Huh. Oh, yeah. I will sometime. Keith was lying on the sofa, engrossed in his cell phone. He often gave me half-hearted answers when I spoke to him. Were we both going to forget about caring for each other and grow old in this degenerate life? I wondered. Then one day, Keith suddenly became interested in fashion. On his day off, he bought a bunch of clothes and put on a fashion show in front of the mirror. He was in a good mood, even humming a tune. I thought it was strange to see Keith so happy. I was suspicious of him suddenly becoming interested in fashion, so I asked. You used to say cheap clothes were enough. What's changed? Noticing me, Keith answered while folding the clothes he had spread out. Oh, I just thought I should take care of my appearance now that I'm getting older. With that, Keith took his clothes to his room. I was strangely happy that Keith had become fashionable. It reminded me of how cool Keith was before we got married. I thought I'd follow Keith's lead and buy some nice makeup to make him fall in love with me again. It felt like we were back in our newlywed days, and I made dinner a little more luxurious. Keith also seemed happy when he saw my appearance and the food, and he asked, What's today? Is it some kind of anniversary? No. You became fashionable, and it reminded me of our early days, so I got a little carried away. I said, blushing, and Keith smiled happily. Oh, is that it? I'm happy to have such a lavish dinner for the first time in a while. Let's eat. Keith ate heartily and finished everything. I was glad I had made the effort to cook, watching him eat. The next day, a colleague called out to me at work. Mrs. Miller, I saw your husband outside yesterday, and he seemed to be having a great time walking around. Mrs. Young, my coworker, nudged my arm and said with a grin, Did you see? He woke up to fashion recently, and he bought a ton of clothes yesterday, so I was surprised. I said, and Mrs. Young's eyes widened. Didn't you go shopping with him? No, I was home yesterday. I denied it, and I felt something was off. Mrs. Young then told me what she remembered seeing yesterday. I'm sure I saw someone yesterday at noon who looked just like Mrs. Yu, with the same height and build, and similar hairstyle and clothes, next to your husband. But I only saw them inside a store, so it might have been a store clerk. Mrs. Young said that, thinking it was a misunderstanding on her part. I was a bit flustered, but I thought it was definitely a store clerk. Keith wouldn't do something like that, I thought. It must have been a store clerk. Don't scare me like that first thing in the morning. You woke me up all at once. I brushed off Mrs. Young's misunderstanding by laughing it off. I was chatting with Mrs. Young until work started when I got an email. It was about the possibility of participating in next month's company trip. I marked my participation and promised to go with Mrs. Young. Then it became evening as I was working, and I went home after stopping by the supermarket. When I entered the room, Keith was in the kitchen, rustling around. Since he never cooks even when he comes home earlier than me, I was suspicious. I'm home. What are you doing? When I called out, Keith was a little surprised, but soon moved away from the kitchen. Oh, welcome back. I was just thirsty, so I was looking for some tea. Keith explained, but he was searching in a spice rack where there should have been neither a cup nor tea. That's the spice rack. You know that the tea is in the fridge, don't you? I said, as I took out the tea and handed it to Keith. I was astonished at Keith, who didn't even know where the tea was. Keith took it with a laugh as if it were someone else's business and slouched around in the living room. I cooked dinner for Keith like that, and while eating together, I talked about what happened at the company today. Speaking of which, I'm going on a company trip next month. I'll also finish shopping for the trip with my colleague, Mrs. Young, next Saturday. Oh, got it. Have fun. Then, I remembered the story that Mrs. Young saw Keith. Oh. Speaking of which, Mrs. Young saw you yesterday. She thought we were on a date because someone who looked like me was next to you. She saw you in a clothing store, but you were the salesperson, right? I said, looking cautiously at Keith. Keith also nodded and spoke. Yeah. I had the salesperson put together a coordination that suited me. I requested clothes that wouldn't look strange next to you since the salesperson looked just like you. I was delighted by Keith's words, thinking of me. Since I thought we were going to live together like family, with no more dates, I got excited about being able to date, holding hands like when we were newlyweds. I completely forgot my uneasy feelings about Keith and finished eating happily. And for a few weeks, I spent peaceful days until it became Friday night. I'll go shopping for the trip with Mrs. Young tomorrow. I'll probably eat dinner too, so I might not get back until after 11 p.m. When I told Keith that I was going out tomorrow, he closed his phone and asked, "Got it. Have fun. Where are you gonna be, by the way?" I think I'll be at the big department store 3 stations away. All right. Don't worry about the time. Just enjoy yourself. If it gets late, I'll come and pick you up. Keith was worried about me coming back. Recently, Keith has been worryingly kind and caring, and I thanked him with a not entirely displeased tone. Saturday morning came, and I went out early. I wanted to buy my summer clothes before meeting Mrs. Young. I spent a lot of time trying on clothes, and I didn't want to bother Mrs. Young, so I went early to choose and buy them alone. I ended up with more bags than planned, and I still had 2 hours left before Mrs. Young would arrive. I looked for a locker to leave my bags in, but there were no vacancies. I had plenty of time, so I thought I'd go home and drop it off. As I was walking down the street near my home, I saw a woman wearing a dress from my favorite brand. It was the very dress I had been wondering whether to buy. Her hairstyle and figure were similar to mine, and as I was watching, thinking I might buy it, the woman stopped right in front of my house. At that moment, I hid behind a utility pole to watch without being seen. As expected, Keith opened the front door and, after looking around, beckoned the woman into the house. Suspicion growing, I decided not to enter through the front door and quietly entered through the kitchen's back door. Then I heard the voices of Keith and the woman from the living room. "Can we be together until tonight?" "Yeah. My wife is going out to have dinner with her friends, so we can spend time together until around 10 p.m. Keith reassured the woman, saying that I wouldn't be there until night. "I'm so happy. Last time you left just after shopping, and I was lonely." Sorry. That day my wife was at home, and I would have looked suspicious if I'd been out late. I could hear Keith's voice, responding sweetly to the woman's cutesy tone. I felt a chill in that moment. I realized that the person Mrs. Young saw last time wasn't a store clerk, but this mistress. The thought that Keith had been taking such care with his appearance for this woman made me angry. "Hey, did you look for the spices? If you didn't, I can't make a delicious meal, you know. I looked for them last time. I'll show you while I still remember." With that, their voices grew closer and closer. I was supposed to leave the clothes and leave, but I feared being discovered and instead went out with the bags. I managed to leave the house just in time, without making a sound. I put the bags in the outdoor shed and left the house in frustration, feeling like crying. As I walked, I wondered how long Keith had been cheating. Thinking that all the efforts Keith had made for me recently were actually for that woman made me furious. Feeling irritated, I met up with Mrs. Young. Even while shopping, I couldn't help but wonder when the two of them had started cheating and who the mistress was. Determined to make him confess, I came up with a plan. After dinner with Mrs. Young, I returned home around 10 p.m. He was lounging around the house as if nothing had happened. "Welcome back. Did you have fun?" Keith was behaving so naturally that I thought what I had seen at noon might have been a dream. "Yes, I had a wonderful time." I responded to his lie with a lie of my own. I wouldn't be satisfied unless I trapped him in a way that he couldn't talk his way out of. I thought so and kept Keith in the dark until my plan was perfect. Of course, during that time, I diligently collected evidence like photographs and recorded phone calls. 3 weeks went by, and I was looking forward to the company trip this weekend. By the way, isn't the company trip coming up soon? When does it start and end? Keith asked with a worried look in his eyes, but I knew he was probably planning to bring that woman over. I answered with a look of concern. It's from Friday morning until Sunday night. Keith, can you manage to cook and all? You might want to order takeout. Yeah. I'll try not to make a mess. I'll miss you, but enjoy your time with your colleagues. I'm sure that at that moment, Keith was secretly celebrating the opportunity to spend time with his mistress. I hoped he would keep playing into my hands without suspecting anything. And then Friday came, and it was the day of the company trip. I was planning to leave the house at 10 a.m., and Keith was leaving for work at 8 a.m., so I would leave later. I took advantage of that time to carry out my plan. After Keith left, I immediately opened his room. I intentionally spilled perfume, filling the room with the scent. Then, I quickly sent Keith an email, telling him that I'd accidentally spilled perfume while cleaning his room and asking him to sleep in the basement from today until Sunday. Keith's room had an inside lock, but the basement had an outside lock. I had utilized the mechanism of the locks. Since I received a reply from Keith agreeing to use the basement, everything seemed to be going according to plan. I looked at Keith's email and then headed straight for the company trip. During the trip, I couldn't relax. My mind was consumed with thoughts of Keith and his mistress, and I found it hard to enjoy myself. Hey, Mrs. Miller. You look pale and you're sweating a lot. I'll tell the boss, why don't you take a break? Mrs. Young, who had been walking with me, looked quite concerned about my condition. I'm sorry, even though I promised to walk with you. I feel sick, so I'm going to leave early. Don't worry about it. The boss was walking over there, so I'll go get him. Mrs. Young ran to the boss and called him over. When the boss saw my condition, he was very concerned and asked if I was feeling unwell. Go back to the hotel, or have your husband come and pick you up. He told me. If Keith came to pick me up, our planned scheme would fail, so I decided to return to the hotel and leave early in the morning. Keith would never think I'd come back on Saturday morning when I said I'd return on Sunday night. I was so excited to imagine Keith's panic-stricken look. When morning came, I apologized to Mrs. Young and my boss and decided to head home early. I took connecting trains and arrived at my nearest station at 9 in the morning. Hoping that Keith and his mistress were still fast asleep, I hurried home. The moment I opened the key to my house, I was sweating so much that it didn't feel like I was opening my own door. With a tension that made me feel like I couldn't make a sound, my heartbeat kept rising. Just when I was going to go to the basement and quietly lock the door, I heard a voice. Keith, wake up. It's already 9 in the morning. I'm hungry, let's eat breakfast. The mistress had woken up. I was so surprised at the voice that I slipped the luggage I was holding and made a loud noise. I was sweating and panicking, but I decided to change my plan instantly. I'm home. I loudly announced my arrival to Keith. The two were silent and still. They probably didn't expect me to come back, and they must be panicking. After that, I continued to walk around the living room, making loud noises and putting away the luggage from the trip. The two were probably stuck in a situation where they couldn't get out. Then I said loudly, Huh, is Keith out? I pretended to look for Keith. Oh, he might be sleeping in the basement. I said it loudly and slowly approached the basement. I heard a small noise from the basement as if they were desperately looking for a hiding place, and I couldn't help but chuckle. Then I flung the basement door open. Huh, he's not here. Maybe he went out, I said and sharply closed the basement door. At the same time, I casually locked it. The two probably haven't realized the seriousness of being locked in, feeling relieved that they've managed to hide safely. I turned on the TV and listened with the volume up a bit. The weather forecaster reported that today was going to be a hot and humid summer day. I turned on the air conditioner in the living room and enjoyed myself in the cool room. On the other hand, the basement was almost like a storeroom, with no air conditioner or fan. I smiled smugly, wondering how long they could endure. An hour passed. Keith and the woman were still holding on, waiting for me to go somewhere. I looked out the window. The sun was shining, and it was a scorching heat. I vowed not to go outside, so as not to give Keith a chance. As I comfortably watched TV and ate snacks, another hour passed. Then, as if they had reached their limit, I heard Keith's voice. Hey, open up. I sighed and headed to the basement. When I opened the key, a stuffy air flowed from the basement. It's hot, give me water. Keith went to the living room, sweating and looking exhausted. I peeked into the basement, but the woman was not there, apparently still hiding. Keith drained the water and started yelling at me. You said I could use the basement. Why did you lock it? Keith showered me with curses. I apologized sincerely, but said a little word to shake Keith. I'm sorry. But when I checked the room, nobody was there. Where were you, Keith? Keith couldn't possibly admit that he was hiding in a closet with a woman, so he blabbered on, raising his voice to cover it up. So, what does it matter? It's hot, it's hot. With that, Keith took a bottle of water in hand and went back down to the basement. I figured he must have gone to give the water to the woman hiding there. 5 minutes later, Keith still hadn't returned and commanded me as follows. I feel like I'm gonna faint from the heat. Go buy some ice cream right now. Keith spoke to me condescendingly, pointing his finger. There's ice cream in the fridge, you know. I saw right through Keith's naive strategy. I had anticipated what Keith was likely to say, and I was prepared. Today, let's have pancakes. Yes, pancakes. You don't have the ingredients, do you? Go to the supermarket and buy them right now. Oh, coincidentally, I was planning to make pancakes today. I have all the ingredients, so there's no need to go shopping today. Keith was trying in some way to get me out of the house. I was desperate not to laugh at Keith as he thought frantically. I finally decided to take drastic action, fearing that if he said anything more, it would be something I hadn't anticipated. The smell of perfume must have already disappeared from your room, and you don't need to use the basement. Shall we clean the basement? As I tried to go to the basement, Keith stopped me in a panic. I'll clean it, so it's okay. You've never cleaned anything before, have you? Even though I said that, Keith was desperate to stop me. I feel like cleaning. Leave it to me. He forcibly took the cleaning tools, so I stared at him and said, then clean your own room instead of the basement. You've never even cleaned your own room before. Start with that, not the basement. Keith was momentarily taken aback by the irrefutable words. I took advantage of the opportunity, hurriedly went down to the basement, and opened the door. The woman was sitting in the middle of the basement room, perhaps because the closet was too hot. The moment our eyes met, her face turned pale. Who are you? Of course, I knew she was his mistress, but I pretended not to know. Keith and the woman thought it was their chance, so they lied. This lady is my boss at work. I forgot to bring home some important documents, and she brought them to me. Yes, that's right. I'm Keith's boss. I'm here to help. Keith thought he had cleverly lied his way out of the situation. The woman also clumsily tried to stick to the lie, desperate to maintain the story. It was too sloppy, and I almost laughed. Really? Your boss comes to deliver them on a weekend morning? Normally, wouldn't you go and pick them up? I said that, and Keith started to sweat. Furthermore, I confronted Keith. Besides, if she's just delivering something, she doesn't have to come into the room, right? Even if you wanted to offer her a tea as thanks, you'd lead her to the living room, wouldn't you? It's strange to bring your boss into a room without air conditioning. Keith seemed to regret the lie he had made on the spot. But it's too late to regret now. The woman also just turned blue and hung her head. Since Keith and the woman were just silent, I brought up the subject. You're not his boss, are you? You're his lover, right? When I said that, Keith's shoulders twitched. It was as if he was admitting it. I'm sorry, he lied. But really, this is the first time I've done something like this. Please believe me in that. Keith tried to explain. The woman also nodded, in agreement with Keith. I'm not going to fall for such a makeshift excuse. So, the woman who was visiting our house last time was someone else? I said, and Keith let out a loud exclamation in alarm. Did you think you could fool me? I've got evidence of you bringing her here again, and all those phone calls. I've got proof. With that, I handed Keith the business card of the divorce lawyer I had gotten. The woman looked pale throughout the ordeal. Keith was very persistent, and I couldn't refuse him. What? You are the one coming on to me, saying you're better than my wife. What are you playing the victim for? When Keith shouted angrily, the woman fought back. I am the victim, telling me to dress and style my hair like your wife, so your wife and neighbors wouldn't find out. You're so selfish. The woman was also yelling, emotions raw. I stopped their quarreling with a single sentence. The real victim here is me. With that, their argument came to an abrupt halt. I quickly got the woman's address and contact information and sent her home for the day. She played the victim card right to the end. Once alone with me, Keith looked awkward and kept his eyes down. Can you please leave right away? I think the lawyer will be contacting you about the division of assets. After that, Keith left with only his essentials. He's probably going to his parents' house. I had expected this, so the moment Keith left, I called his parents. Mr. Miller, I'm sorry to call so suddenly. Can I talk to you for a bit? I told his parents that Keith's infidelity had caused us to divorce, and they were quite angry. They apologized to me and promised to kick him out even if he came back home. Keith moved exactly as I had predicted. He apparently tried to lie and stay with his parents. I'm home. Uh, we're doing some renovations at the house. Kate went to stay at her parents', so let me stay here too. He shamelessly tried to stay with this lie, but his parents, having heard everything from me, lectured Keith and kicked him out. Keith will be staying in a hotel for a while, and I'm sure his money will run out soon. As I imagined Keith feeling uncomfortable as his address changes and rumors spread after the divorce, I found it funny and couldn't help laughing. I was delighted thinking about Keith's future miserable life. And the woman he cheated with will also be served with a claim for damages for emotional distress, so a few days later, the woman came to my house. Her parents were standing behind her. They said that she wasn't working and couldn't pay the claim, so she had turned to her parents. And her parents, feeling terribly sorry, wanted to apologize in person. The sight of the three of them apologizing at my front door was quite ridiculous. I told the cheating woman this. You can take years if you need to, but you must pay back the money you earn yourself. Don't rely on your parents at all. With that, the woman, who seemed intent on relying on her parents, looked fearful, almost crying. No matter how much she resisted, I couldn't sympathize with her. I thought it served her right. After a while, I received payment from Keith and the woman. I sold the house we were living in and moved to an apartment for one person. I'd never lived alone before, so I was anxious, but it turned out to be comfortable. I didn't want to give up on love because of what happened, so I'm going to start looking for a new relationship. I'm still anxious about falling in love again, but I think I can forget about my ex-husband entirely by finding new love. I've decided to live